Hello, welcome to the Jordan P. Peterson podcast, where we within the community kind of go over the different topics that Peterson brings up and the different videos that he's put out. So, since we've kind of gone through all of his lectures, some of us multiple times, we're now going through his conversations with interesting people. And the first one on that list is with J.W. Pennebaker, who seems to be a strong inspiration for the self-authoring program that Jordan B. Peterson created. The conversation that he had was pretty interesting, especially, or at least what I found interesting was the usage of words like "I," like going into what that kind of says about the person themselves based on how much they use the I in their sentences and just the different indicators that it kind of lets out. And I wanted to look through my self-authoring program that I had filled out probably about 4 or maybe more months ago. And I noticed just how much I use I. Of course, self-authoring does kind of require quite a lot of I, but usage within it. But I don't know what that says about me. We're here with Sumit also. Sumit, have you done the self-authoring program?
Well, I have got the code for that from Patreon.
Mm-hmm.
Man, I have cleaned up my room, but no, I haven't done the one.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
It is one of those things I keep kind of procrastinating over it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it took me about, I think, 4 days overall to actually complete it. And that was, I don't even remember what exactly got me to finally do it. I think it was just kind of discontent from where I was currently. And then, yeah, it's such an intimidating thing to really start in on. There needs to be like a precursor to the self-authoring program, which I guess is kind of like the understand myself personality test thing that you can do. But yeah, something less intimidating than actually self-authoring. But I guess in the cases where like implementing it within a high school or a college for credits and things like that, then since it's something that's forced upon you, then it should be something much more easy to get into for those people. Yeah.
I'm just scared, man.
Mm-hmm.
There is this past authoring also, right? Is it called past authoring?
Mm-hmm.
Or I mean, there was one about past and there is one about future, right?
Yeah. I did the future one since I don't have much of a past, or at least by my own idea of a past worth going into. But
yeah, I'll get around to it. But I find it very, like you said, you're saying intimidating, but I find it like fear.
mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny. Even though I did do the self-authoring program, like after I finished it, after those 4 days, I kind of like never even looked at it again since then. Kind of, and it probably like helped it helped in my short term. Just like felt good for the next week after that. But since I hadn't actually implemented a lot of the things that I had talked about in it, it just kind of sat on my shelf for quite a while.
Okay, wait a minute. So Peterson keeps on saying that people who did it had their life had improved after doing it. So okay, so from from that I kind of understand. You do it, your life improves, and cool, that's great. But what you are saying is that you actually have to do things to improve your life after doing the program.
Yeah, that's a weird thing about it. Yeah, you actually have to. You can like come up with a plan for what to do, and then actually not do any of it, and it doesn't make much of a difference. I mean, I'm sure there's some difference that occurred because there was like after that. I think like a couple months later, that's when we started doing our um, buddy system within the community of trying to actually achieve some of our goals and desires. So that was a partial implementation of some of the things in my list, but I wasn't going off of my self-authoring program to find out what I needed to go off of. Those were all just kind of like things I came up with that I needed in that moment, really, instead of my long-term goals. Whew.
Man, does this program suck? Really, really, until now, I was under the impression that you do this program, you plan the future, and your outcome improves. I did not know you had to do things.
What did you think it was? Just yeah, just completely changes your personality so that now you become the person that you wish you were. No. I wish. Maybe if I filled out the future authoring program every single day, then maybe that could turn me into the person of who I wish I was. I don't know. Of course, since it took me 4 days to actually get through it, I doubt that's really viable. Though I bet I could do it again in a day. But I don't know. That's the thing. When I was filling it out, I didn't take his advice and did it badly. Though looking over it now, I can see that I don't know. Some of this stuff isn't as good as it could be. But yeah, that's why it took me 4 days to really do it, because I wanted to flesh it out as best as I could so that it could be kind of my foundation for to build my life upon, or my new life, whatever that was. Hey, Tyler's here.
Sorry, I had the stream up. I was listening while I was getting ready.
Mm-hmm. That's all right. So
no, wait. Let me interject what I was hearing while I was turning this on. You'll never, ever, ever feel like you're the person you want to be, right? As long as you continue to maintain the desire to become better every day, right? So it's important. It's really important that you be able to feel the space between that. This kind of weird mix of feeling like you're moving towards something that you desire, and yet you will never ever quite reach it, and being satisfied somewhat with that, yet also being unsatisfied with it because that's part of the motivation for moving towards it. Like, you'll never ever feel like you are the person that you want to be, because it seems to be one huge component of being is becoming.
This kind of brings up the conversation you and I were having the other day about the best Buddhists are those that lose that desire for like being perfectly content with who they are, which I'm probably butchering somewhat, but that's at least the partial goal I see within reading a bit about Buddhism.
Yeah, well, loss of desire is definitely an interesting way to portray it.
But yeah, that's the problem with existing, is there's a constant desire or need for things other than yourself, and just in order to continue existing.
Yep. And that's okay. I mean, to the extent that we are characterizing it properly, I don't agree with the loss of desire, let's say. I think that represents some kind of well, so it may be useful for environments that are not changing, for static environments, but the time frame on which the environment is changing right now in Western civilization is so rapid that you couldn't possibly survive, you couldn't possibly adapt with that perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're sitting in a monastery where every day you sweep the same floors and nothing from the outside world ever comes in, the same crops grow in your courtyard, the same seasons happen, it seems like something you can get away with.
Well, within more popular culture, even in Western society, the philosophies of Buddhism and Stoicism are kind of taking fire, or no, not taking fire, taking grasp within the people up there.
Yeah. All right. So, I mean, they pick and choose, though. And I don't know if any of them are living, let's say in the popular media, are living out that particular ideal. It's more like meditative practices and losing that desire in the moment during that meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And that has value, it seems, certainly.
Mm-hmm. So what's brought up quite a lot within the conversation between Pennebaker and Peterson is just the effectiveness of articulating your thoughts, be it through conversation, through writing, through hearing other people discuss it. Though that wasn't really brought up in the conversation, but just from seeing the types of people, the types of responses from followers of Peterson, that's a common occurrence of people not having the words to articulate the types of things that they know already to be true, and then Peterson does so. And then Peterson talks about how that's the role of the intellectual within society, is to articulate those things so that they can better understand themselves.
Yeah. Well, in my own life, the ability to articulate seems somewhat lopsided, let's say. I mean, an internal world where I live in kind of phantasmagoric dream of visions and abstract concepts, and the external world when I attempt to communicate those visions that are continuously swirling about into words when I try to translate all of them. And I think that may be the case for a lot of people, but they're not necessarily to the degree that I experience it, but that many people have unarticulated visions that they want to condense into words that they can share with others and find out if those visions are worthwhile, if they will function in the environment, say.
Mm-hmm.
The environment seems to be oppressive to some degree. The individuals who are seeking to reconstruct themselves or reorder themselves in a more efficient, effective manner. Effective. This program works for that. But you were mentioning that.
Hey, sorry to interrupt. I can hear John just fine, but I can't hear Tyler so fine. So, John, are you able to hear Tyler?
Yeah, Tyler, are you using like your a mobile mic or something from your phone?
No.
So, well, I don't think it's coming through the Yeti, if that's what it is.
Yeah, normally Tyler's voice quality is very superb. So not sure what's going on today.
Anyway,
Aha.
there you go.
There we go.
Mhm.
Awesome.
Yeah, I don't know why, but for some reason, it sometimes randomly it seems it switches back to the default as the webcam mic in this Google Hangout session. It's for just in this setting. It's really strange. Okay, so that's better. Okay, good.
It's more than better, Tyler. It's great.
Oh, that's great. You make me feel so good, Sumit. This is part of the self-authoring. Actually, that's one of the things that Peterson points out is the feelings associated with how you're developing your visions of the future, and how you imagine the past, and I use that word "imagine the past" because it's not clear that your memories can be seen as like the perfect retrieval analog that we seem to be so focused on in computer in the digital age, right? So when we remember something, it is always through the lens of at least two perspectives. The perspective you had when the memory was recorded and your current perspective when you are recalling the particular neural net that's associated with that memory. It could also have been adjusted along the way many, many times as you remembered it many, many times. And so it could be this very strange, almost like a long dragon that changes shape throughout time. Maybe how I think of it sometimes. But you have to reorient yourself in such a way that the memory is it can be used as a resource to reconfigure yourself into a more harmonious configuration in the present.
So like it's useful to you.
Right. Yeah. Because that's what they're for. That's what memories are for. They're used as a weird heuristic of past experiences for the present, right? Oh, I've touched the stove a couple times. Yeah, when it was on, it was hot. I shouldn't do it anymore. I say a couple times. It only took me one. Okay. Only took me one.
Well, yeah. I was just reminded of something Paul Vanderklay talks about in some of his earlier videos. He's a pastor up in California that goes into a lot of Peterson's like conversations and things. He talks about how children and not just children, but tons of people are continually like rewatching The Office, just as an example. And like I can see it for myself. That's like probably the show I've seen the most often of all the different shows out there. And the reason that he suspects it is because there's like hidden information within that show of like how to behave within society, because like there's 7 different archetypes of different types of people interacting with each other, with the authoritarian with Dwight, the clown with Michael, or also with Jim. With Michael, it's kind of the incompetent manager. And then, yeah, there's all these different figures that are interacting with each other. And we continually watch it because there's information to be learned about how to behave, not just behave, but interact in that type of environment. Because that microcosm of a workplace is something that reflects back the macrocosm of our society and any other place where you're interacting with other types of people. And it's like our brain is continually trying to go through and distill that information and to utilize it within our lives. In kind of the same way that you have a recurring dream. I had noticed that I had this reoccurring dream of being lost out somewhere when it's late at night, and then like I'm trying to find my way back home while driving along the highway and not like able to I have no idea where I am, so I have no idea where I'm going. And then at one point, I wanted to use that as inspiration for like a short story. And so I wrote out a short story entailing all of that. And noticed that I haven't had that reoccurring dream ever since. And it wasn't like reoccurring a lot of the time, but I'd say I've probably had it like 4, maybe 5 times, but not since actually writing it out and understanding it a little bit better.
Understanding a little bit better, so you were able to connect it with what, real world value or interpretation?
Yeah, kind of. Like, or at least understanding what the meaning of the dream was kind of just this feeling, this aimlessness, and being unsure of.
Yeah. Same thing happened with me, not with writing, but when I was much younger and I had family issues, let's say, which are immediately apparent symbolically in the description of the dream that is about to follow. So I would be in my house, and there is a giant approaching, a huge, tall male giant, just walking slowly towards our neighborhood, let's say, right? And my image, my camera would shift to just below his legs. You could see these massive, like 400 or 500 feet tall, massive legs just pounding slowly towards us. And my job was to lead everyone to a secret door that opened up in our laundry room. And I would lead the family and the other neighborhood people down in there, and we'd go through these elaborate tunnels full of hieroglyphics, and it's very fascinating, interesting. And we'd escape this giant coming to kill us all. So the more I had the dream, the tunnels would stay the same, but they would get longer every time I had the dream. It was fascinating. I still remember the first few hundred feet of the tunnel. Every turn, some of the hieroglyphs on the wall, it's etched permanently in my head. But this is my father. I was terrified of him. And when I figured that out, it just went away. Disappeared. And now it's left only as the memory, reinterpretable through that lens of understanding. And Sumit brought up something in chat here. About people who get into bad relationships and its relation to memory.
Okay, so just to give you an introduction to that, what I was thinking. I have heard, forgot where I heard it, that if you look at the past, you tend to remember the good things. That is certainly true. You remember the things that were really bad, like the example Tyler gave about the store. But for example, let me give you one example. I was in college and I did not enjoy the experience much. But when I look back, I only can recall the positive events. I do recall the trouble times, but they don't have that much emotional impact. I remember having good time with the friends in the last year, and that's what I remember. So maybe it has something to do with the maybe my personality. Like I let go of the things and right. So not being revengeful for the rest of your life. So could that be that be an issue for people who keep on getting into similar type of abusive relationships, because they kind of tend to maybe remember the good times. I mean, what I'm trying to say is maybe that person, it's the whole package, right? The person is a whole package. So the thing that makes you miserable about the person, maybe some part of it you enjoy in a certain way. So you remember that, and you keep on repeating that pattern. Can that happen?
Yeah, I think it frequently occurs with people who aren't aware of the pattern. And that seems to be the problem. Their vision is limited to a tiny subset of the things that they desire, and that probably ignores a vast portion of the current circumstance. So when looking for a partner in a relationship that keeps failing, they may be looking for a set of 2 or 3 characteristics, like blonde, blue eyes, makes them laugh. So something as simple as that. In the meantime, they're ignoring, say, other serious and significant temperaments or past behavioral examples that would indicate that the relationship they're about to enter into is actually just like their past ones, in the negative sense. So it's probably a weird mix of willful ignorance, because the desire for short-term positive feelings seems more obvious, more salient to their awareness than the potential for bad. So sometimes we don't remember our past bad experiences because we're afraid to look at them. And sometimes we don't remember them because we've forgiven. And I'd say that's probably a good metric for whether or not that's the case, is if you keep repeating the same mistakes, or if the same bad things keep happening, you probably haven't been looking closely enough, which is what the self-authoring program is all about. It's trying to look closely at these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I sometimes wonder about how, like, I don't know, with people that are higher up in their career, they have the ability to talk to like therapists and things like that. But for most, I would say the broad spectrum of regular people, that's not really something that they can have access to.
Yeah. Well, our family's always been our therapists, right? Or a loved one of some kind. To the extent that people do articulate their current emotional state and problems that they're experiencing, they usually do it with family members or friends.
Mm-hmm. Of course, there's still the instances where you have things that you can't even share with your families and friends.
Yeah, that's especially bad. And that's what the past self-authoring is supposed to get at, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Because the likelihood that past experience of significant negative emotional affect is found within your family is extraordinarily high. Right? It's almost always the case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I always think back to Brett Weinstein's case about the utility of confessionals within, say, the Catholic religion. How there's that ability for people to at least speak about the things that are that cause them guilt, and then that's useful because it's kind of like a pseudo therapeutic session, just so that they can get over, or not really get over, but work through the problems that they're facing. And that tends to happen a lot with different pastors, like I mentioned, Paul Vanderklay. He there's like a lot of homeless people and things that he talks to that just kind of sit around at his doorstep, and then he's like the only friend that they have, and yeah.
What value in people like that, you know?
Yeah.
It's fascinating how individuals fall into those roles. And
I guess there's
Can you imagine Sam Harris doing that? Not to disparage Sam Harris, but I mean, he's kind of the archetypal.
Yeah, he's not suited for that type of work.
Not at all. Not at all. Okay, so this is a point that I was thinking about just a few minutes ago. The parts of yourself that you want to change and become a better or a better reconfiguration of yourself, let's say, the parts that you'd like to improve are almost certainly to be found as a component of another individual somewhere else in the world. And this is how we view heroes, let's say. You want to become like a hero. Many people want to be like Jordan Peterson, for instance. And so they'll articulate parts of his personality that they wish to take on themselves. Mm-hmm. And the more good parts of a personality found within any one individual, the closer they come to approximating the Superman or the Christ figure. But that's very rare. It's very rare that you find a single individual. So it's more like you need to have a selection of other people that you're looking to and noticing various facets of who they are that you wish to emulate.
Yeah. I mean, it's like Sam Harris, he plays the role of the articulator for the analytical people that are stuck within more narrative, not societies, but communities. So the same thing for like Matt Dillahunty. There's somebody there that's articulating the problems that they see within their own community, and then they flock towards those figures.
Right. And part of the problem is fixating your view upon any single individual, let's say. Mm-hmm. So devoting your attention wholly to a Sam Harris or wholly to Peterson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like, can you imagine somebody that is a adequate therapeutic speaker? Can you imagine them as being some sort of like public intellectual figure? Or
yeah. Well, I can imagine it, but it requires a significant amount of effort and reconfiguration in the world.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's see. Imagination. Yeah, there's I forget his name, but yeah, there's a couple prominent people within like the 60s and 70s that they have a certain aspect of that, but not quite as analytical as the people we see now.
Right. Alan Watts, maybe something like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Sumit, what were you? Sorry, you wanted to bring up something?
Yeah. So what I wanted to bring up was something from my memory. So it has all those clauses related to, issues with memory and remembrance. Maybe I don't remember it exactly like it is. Right. But here are two examples. So first one would be, it's related to the pastor example you gave. So I was in college and I got into trouble with the authorities there, and they took my laptop away. Not that I was doing anything inappropriate, but I was doing my own thing. I wasn't focusing on the lecture. So the second in command at the college was monitoring the class, and he just took away my laptop. And back then, I was a teenager. My laptop is all I had in a way.
Yeah.
That was my window into the world, and I was very sad. And I was waiting outside his cabin, not knowing, because maybe in your country you can be disagreeable with your teachers. Over here, we're always like scared of our teachers and the authority figures. No way. You got into trouble with the authority figure that, like, you'll be really scared. So that was the situation, and I was standing outside his. He had this big room, and I was just waiting outside, and I was really scared. So this teacher, whose class was it, in which I was not paying attention, he had just happened to walk by that area, he looks at me, he stops, and then he puts his hand on my shoulder and he just walks away. And I felt so much better. I still to this day remember what he did.
Hmm.
That just simple gesture, and that really, I don't know if it changed me as a person or not, but I do remember it. Another example would be, I grew up, so my dad was I grew up in a state, and my dad obviously was from that state where people, let's just say, are not very polite about things. So in the house it was always like kind of a rude kind of a behavior. So that's their way. They're like very rough people, let me put it this way. So even if they are talking in like peace, you'd be like, are these people fighting? uh, and I was a kid, I was the new generation, so I did not, uh, I was different, and I was very kind of bothered by all those things. So a friend of mine once took me to his place, and he made this thing, food for us in the kitchen. We were two people, and he was very nice, kind. He showed me his books, and he he taught me how to use chopsticks, and he was being, like I say, very polite. And I had never really experienced that before, and that really that experience did have an impact on me. I was like, that's how you should treat people, like I still tell him to this day, that day you taught me how you should treat people. And so yes, there is something. And this analytical thinking and all that. uh, so I was a science student, so there was enough of that going on in college. They taught us physics and everything. But these are different kind of things, uh, and
Yeah, well,
that it yeah.
it has to
Sorry.
do with the tension that you had and how it needed to be released. So waiting outside the door to be punished or threatened or something like that is this massive emotional tension. And it needed an emotional key to unlock it, let's say, and reconfigure it into a more harmonious whole. So the unknown, the chaos of what was about to occur got resolved to some degree by that shoulder touch, that human connection between people that seemed to indicate understanding and then a desire to release some of that tension. Whereas, let's say, other temperaments or other people in different positions who are not experiencing that kind of tension may be experiencing some kind of analytical tension where they're holding two competing ideas or three competing ideas in their head, and they need some kind of analysis. You'll see this with the people who latch on to Harris because of his denigration of religion, the atheistic types, let's say. What they're doing is they're attempting to resolve the combative tension between two massive ideologies in their head, the religious archetypal view and the scientific materialism worldview. And someone like Harris is coming along and putting his analytical hand on their shoulder and allowing them to resolve that emotionally, let's say, such that they can focus more on something else in their life rather than the tension that's produced between those two things. And they're able to marshal arguments that he uses and point to him as someone that they can all rally their community underneath his flag. So the emotional valence of it is what matters. I think you're right.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that because of temperament and circumstance, people reach it in slightly different paths.
Yeah. I don't want to just break it down all the way, though, to the psychological aspects for why people gravitate towards the people that they do. Because, I mean, there's, at least subjectively, it feels as if we're gravitating towards our heroes because they're people that are speaking the truth. And this is so obviously right. And so these are the people that we're idolizing, like with Peterson. Like like this fans say, he's articulating truths that we didn't know how to articulate, or things like that. And I'm sure the same types of things happen to Harris and Dawkins and Dennett, all these people, Shermer.
So you mean we'd be leaving out some other important step of the analysis as to why people are drawn to these individuals, and that the searching for truth is more important? If that were the case, then we'd have to be assigning what truth is, and wondering why a whole large swath of people are attracted to Harris and Peterson, even though they're opposing in their views on truth.
Mm-hmm.
They can't both be right, let's say, or rather, there isn't a single aspect of being right that both camps have the totality of.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is. I think for most people, it's more the emotional valence issue. And that's what you'll see come out in the discussion, say, on any given community page associated with any of these individuals. The ones who marshal the Harris perspective are typically railing against the religious perspective that they perceive as a negative suppression of the human soul. And people in Peterson's camp are rallying under his banner because they perceive the archetypal truths of, say, pragmatic truth as emboldening and enlivening, and not necessarily a negative effect. Right? There are plenty of people. So I don't idolize either. Every time I come across someone who I have a temptation to idolize, there's a part of my brain, a fairly significant part, that I can't ignore, that immediately starts tearing them down. I immediately start looking for weaknesses, because I've been aware in the past, I think, inordinately aware of the capacity for people to hero worship and ignore aspects that need to be worked on. So I try to, in my head, give Sam Harris his due for the things that he does right, and Peterson his due for the things that he does right. And also the things that they do wrong. Right? Because you drive on a road by avoiding the barriers on the side, not necessarily by following the lines. Right? There are two ways to look at it. You don't want to end up on the ditch, so you can look at the ditch and say, I don't want to go there. Or you can look at the line in the middle or the lines on the side and say, follow the line.
Mm-hmm.
That's the past and the present and the future self-authoring program, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Peterson brings that up about
Oh, hold on, you're breaking up.
can't.
Yeah, you might have moved your laptop somewhere. I'm not sure.
Breaking up.
You are. We all are, Sumit. The internet is breaking up. The beauties of perspective. It's all relative. Oh, he's coming back. Right. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm currently going through Jonathan Haidt's book, The Righteous Mind. It's quite fascinating to see how our emotional intuition drives our perspective on things, and our ability to take in facts or to not see facts. or to interpret things in a different way. We went into this really interesting case where he hypnotized like a group of people to where like half of them saw whenever they would hear or read the word take, they would feel a flash of disgust. And for the other group, if they heard or read the word often, they would get that flash of disgust. Then they had them read through like different stories of people, and for about a third of them, even for a case where the usage of the word was like irrelevant or yeah, it didn't even really matter that much to the story. Like it was somebody kind of doing what seems to be a good thing. I think it was like listening to the policies of the people for some sort of campaigner. But because it was like take policies or no, it was like would often listen to the policies of other people. And then for a third of the people, that because they had that instinct put into them, they still saw that person as they would like come up with reasons for why they didn't like him, because he was a showboat or he was a goody two shoes or something like that. Didn't trust him somehow. And how, yeah, just realizing how these types of things are within us all the time. It's like startling and worrisome.
Well, yeah, let's see if that's working. Hey.
Yeah, it's working.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, okay, good. Okay, cool. All right. Yeah, so hypnotism. All right, this is tangentially related, but so I've tried to be hypnotized many times. It never works. I try so hard. I listen, follow the commands. I do everything I'm supposed to do. It's impossible. Mm-hmm. It's just not possible for me to be hypnotized. And yet it seems true for other people. And I really wonder what the difference is. I really wonder what's going on. No suggestion has ever been. It's almost like the conscious filter of what I allow to become part of me is just always on. And I'm always paying attention to the sense data that's coming in and discriminating.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's it's quite true that many people are. It's quite true that everyone sees the world through their own particular lens. Some of those lenses seem to be more adaptive in real time than others. And I wonder about that.
Can you guys tell me one thing, because it's all centered around the same thing? Hello?
Yeah. What's the one thing?
Yeah, so so remember how, John, you were talking about this Peterson guy articulating what people have always like believed to be the true.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that's interesting, because I have felt the same way, because I had known certain things, and there were times my analytical friends were criticizing it, and I could not prove it to them in that instant, but I believed it, and later on I could see through my eyes what was happening, that they were true, but I could only see that as a consequence of what I was doing. It was not something I could actually prove. So my concern is around the same thing. Like some people might say Sam Harris is articulating things they have always believed. They couldn't articulate it. So where does this thing come from? This thing that it is true and you cannot articulate it. Where does it come from? Like Tyler was wondering, right? And it was the same thing. Remember the thing about beyond good and evil. So where he says a lot of these philosophers, they didn't arrive at the truth. They have logically, their instincts or some inner state of mind, something led them to that conclusion, and now they are all spending their time trying to justify it. That kind of relates to your experiment about that experiment you were talking about hypnotism. So where does this come from, this truth that we are talking about, which we know it is true but we can't articulate it, because it's not same for it's same for the people who maybe are following Peterson. It may not be same for people who are following Harrison. So who programmed that truth into us, so is it so I wonder about that.
Think of it like this. Your life experiences, this is going to be a weird metaphor, but it's all right, just bear with me. Your life experiences have turned your brain into spaghetti. It's a big bowl of spaghetti flopping around in your head. You go out into the world and you find Jordan Peterson, and he is shaped like a colander, okay, with spaghetti-sized holes on the bottom, and you can put your life's experiences into his colander, and the spaghetti filters just nicely or loses its water, however you want to picture that metaphor, right? But other people have gone through life and their brain and experiences have turned into a soup of spaghetti sauce, okay? And if you were to try to throw that into a colander, it just, all sips through and it's no use to you, and it doesn't feel right, let's say. But they find a Sam Harris who is a nice, clean glass bowl that they can put their spaghetti sauce into. It makes more sense to them, right? That's what's going on there. It's not like everybody arrives at the same place by the same experiences. There are plenty of people who see the problems of religion primarily because they were raised in it and felt constricted by it in some way, or it lacked explanatory power, right? And that's part of what you were discussing. Like, you could feel something is true, but you can't quite articulate it. You just know that the current way of seeing it, or the current way that people are saying is the right way, isn't the totality. There's something else missing. So you can reformulate and articulate what you know to be true once you find the right shape for your experiences to be molded into. And I tend to think that the best view is everyone attempting to see both Sam Harris and Peterson as truthful within certain realms and useful within certain realms in enacting in the world. Because I ironically agree with Peterson on the truth aspect of things, and less with Harris, yet that leads me to also accepting Sam Harris's viewpoint, and hence the irony. I don't think there is, according to Sam Harris, a convergent, logical, derivable truth value that is the same for every person in every circumstance. I think that's limited because of the fundamental nature of reality, the dynamic nature of reality, the chaos associated with what it is to live in a dynamic system, in a chaotic system. Sam Harris, and if you listen to him talk and the way you see his mind work, and if you pay attention to your own mind when you're learning about these things in physics or math, this is the way it works. You seek for convergent truths, logically derived propositions that are the same for everyone, all the time, no matter what. I just think that there are only a certain number of those perfectly derivable logistic truths. So you need Peterson's viewpoint as well. You need the pragmatic aspect, because while you can see that you lack explanatory power and maybe you can't quite articulate it, at some point in the future, you're going to be able to step outside of your current bounds of knowledge, outside the boundary edge, the boundary layer of what you know to be true, and look back into it with new knowledge and a new perspective and see a new truth that was not derivable from within that system. Though you could feel it, that you could feel that you didn't have it all, and there's no way that you could have derived it from within the system. It's also related to the post-justification process, right? That Don was talking about. We look in the past and try to justify the position that we're at now. We have to see some path, how we got here. And in many cases, people are willing to envision a path that isn't quite right, let's say.
Okay, here is the thing. I was going to give you two examples, but the second one I just forgot as soon as I remembered it. So the first one would be this whole thing about corruption. So even before I read this Russian guy who wrote Gulag Archipelago, or this Peterson person, even before that, I had believed that whenever you see the corruption going on in your organization, for example, you should stand up and raise your voice. You and other people obviously were not interested in that, but I did not care. I knew that all it takes is for one person to stand up, and yes, a lot of bad things will happen to you, but that's okay. So I had believed that, and then Peterson talks about the same things. Yes, the another example I just remembered, right, which would be that a lot of bad things happen to us, right? We get bullied, we get treated like crap. So some people who are able to grow from that, you would find, looks at that and they look at that and they go, here is how, now that I know it hurt. It is the reverse of what people like Cain does in the Cain and Abel story. So they look at the fact that they are hurt and then realize, here is how I will not treat people. If they get deceived and they are really hurt because of that, they are able to say, oh, deception hurts, or it causes all these problems, so I will not do it. I will try to, and nobody taught me that. And and a lot of these experiences happen, when you are growing up, when you are a child. By child, I mean not child who can hear things, who can speak, who is doing things. So and so where does that come from? I mean, I don't remember getting taught all those things. And later on, like 10 years later, you run into a guy like Peterson, he's talking about the same things. So so what you were talking about, Tyler, was that your life experiences had turned you into this thing that fits exactly with the Peterson. There is some truth to that. But if you go back to the life experience of the person, right, you would arrive at all these decision points. And he would have to make a certain kind of decisions in order to arrive and become this thing that fits into the Peterson framework. If that person had made some different decisions, he would have had sitting with Osama bin Laden in his cave, plotting something bad. That can totally happen. So, and you don't always have you never have the information required or the knowledge or the education required to make that decision in a certain way. So I'm again left with the sorry about the background noise. So I'm again left with this theory that maybe there is such a thing called soul or something, and uh, that is like already I have, which makes me more compatible with people like Peterson, because I make those kind of decisions, right? So that's what that's the thing I wanted. I agree with you on that part, that my life experiences had turned me into that thing, and those other people. But I want you guys to talk about how those experiences, right? They are very dynamic. They require a lot of decision making on the part of the individual, or having a certain kind of attitude. And it's just remarkable that so many people, like, I'm not even from the West, and there are people all over the world, right, who have had that kind of attitude without even being taught that, uh, spread across cultures. And it's just I wonder how that happens. Right.
Yeah. Well, it's a bit of a mystery that isn't solved yet. I mean, we can talk about it in low resolution. We can talk about it in terms of archetypes. We can talk about it in terms of, say, like fundamental underlying neurological structures that, something like Chomsky talks about with his universal grammar, that there are these fundamental aspects to language that are universal to every type of language. And it's probably associated with a underlying physical structure in the brain that processes these types of symbols. And we don't know how those structures arrived, because it's a chicken and the egg problem. Is it the words that formed the language that formed the structures, or the structures that formed the language and the words? And how would that be possible if that's the case? And those two perspectives, let's say, are bound up in the split between Peterson and Harris. And that's why I think you need both. It's almost like I mean, you can look at it in different ways. You can look at it in convergent versus divergent truths, or you can look at it in retrospective versus forward-looking. Can you derive the future from the present? In which case, that's convergent. Right? If you can't, it's divergent. It could be any of a number of possible futures. And why you in particular, and not 100 people around you, came to the conclusions that you did growing up as a child, I don't know if there is a convergent truth for that, let's say, but you could speak about it in high level or low resolution. You could say that some weird combination of 5 or 6 different experiences, in addition to the very specific set of structures in your brain that were created when you had these experiences, or the knowledge that you were taught, led to this. Or you could try to posit some soul quality that you had that others didn't. Now, the value of that, I'm not so sure about. It seems to elicit a type of judgment that can be made for the behaviors of others that allows us to dismiss them, or to reduce their quantity or quality of soul, let's say. Whenever I think about these things, I often have this continuous flashing of vision of various feral children I've read about in the past. Children who had no access to language or the structure of society, and managed to somehow survive to pubescence or even into adulthood, and had no discernible human qualities about them, let's say, and no capacity to learn language beyond a certain primitive gesturing and grunting. It's symbolic. And syntactic knowledge is just not possible.
Yeah, there's some pretty strange things to do with what exactly the soul would be if it exists, just because there's still a lot to consciousness that we don't exactly understand, like how our brain connects two different types of things and sees it as one thing, like instead, because I have one part of my brain focusing on the shapes of objects, one part of my brain focusing on the colors of objects, one part of my brain focusing on the motion of objects, but no part of the brain that takes those two pieces and puts them together. It's something that kind of comes about as a emergent conscious experience, kind of. Just strange.
Yeah, and that's kind of a good way. So to make it a little more concrete with Sumit's example. So Sumit, if to use the hectic traffic laws or inability to obey traffic laws in your part of the world, let's use that as an example. If you, as a child, had witnessed 2 or 3 of your cousins run over by cars, because they were, walking through the street and somebody ran over them. When you come to an intersection, or when you, for the first time, start driving your car through the streets, what are you more likely to do? How are you more likely to behave? Right? If the negative effect of those memories kind of constrains your behavior, that's one way to see how experience can form what it would be to be a moral person, let's say. Now you can adjust that just a tad. What if those cousins had been terrible to you as a child? It was something really, truly awful. Like, what if they were sexually abusive to you? And hearing them and how they died was somewhat pleasurable to you. So at the time, the formulation of the memory was not necessarily, upon hearing of their death, about the awfulness of an inability to obey a traffic law, let's say, but more about the pleasure that you receive knowing that you'll no longer be abused by these people. The way that you form that memory and the way it's encoded and how you'll recall it is now dramatically different when you approach the current situation of how should I drive my vehicle or how should I cross the road. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. That's one aspect of it, but there's also, you could try to find there, like, perhaps genetic mutations within you that allow you to, like, see certain things a little bit better, or to experience things more so, like, there's always that continual, like, argument between whether something is culturally inherited, genetically inherited, or individually inherited.
Yeah, well, okay, so if you're a total dummy, right? You got an IQ of 50. The ability to hold in your head multiple disparate ideas and draw conclusions from them is extremely limited. So you may have heard about the deaths of these cousins and sighed a sense of relief, but had no ability to hold also the traffic laws and how that's related to it at the same time. And in which case, you can't really derive any further propositions, and you can't really derive any future behavior based on it. So that's one example of how genetic differences would allow you to see the world.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that can exist at extraordinarily different levels. It's not necessarily about IQ, but if you're a Sam Harris type who has a high IQ, but has a predominantly analytical mind, then the world that he sees and the lens through which he sees it causes him to make decisions, moral decisions, based primarily upon those fundamental calculations. And yeah, I mean, you can't get away from that. You have to look through a particular lens, or you see too much. And I think the combination of those two views, say Peterson and Harris, are what's needed when trying to find the best route. You have to be able to scan the horizon, the holistic view, and choose the best route, the reductionist view. And the conversation between those two perspectives is what allows you to act most effectively in the world and most efficiently, to use your resources to gain, to benefit yourself, and, you know, through equilibration, that's something that's meaningful, your family and your community.
I do want to bring up there's a lot more to Jonathan Haidt's book than just the hypnotism, because that was just an example of how they were able to manipulate people's moral intuitions through hypnotism, when in fact it's almost as if it's like we're continually hypnotizing ourselves unknowingly in influencing our moral intuitions about things, like just through experiencing the world. That's what's affecting our intuitions. And I think, like, I don't know, maybe it's just for myself, but reading Paul Graham's essay on What You Can't Say, that really made a lot of sense to me, because for communities that have a sharp divide between the things they can talk about, they can't talk about, the things that they put a lot of effort into defending or ignoring, anything that speaks to that aspect of an individual that can converge the two ideas that they've had that were against each other in some sort of way. Those are the types of ideas that will resonate within people.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
as we were talking about before, the ability to resolve the tension within the system and how it's perceived.
Mm-hmm.
You guys know how holograms are made? You know what a hologram is?
Yeah, I know of it. I don't know how it works, though.
So one way to think of it is every potential perspective is contained within every single part of the picture, such that when you change your position while looking at it, you get to see every perspective as it adjusts through. And the way they do that with holograms is different wavelengths of light. And that's why it has that rainbow sheen to it, because it has to pass through the various wavelengths to allow that to happen. Each of the totality of the image is contained within a single spot within the image. And so something like that is occurring when you look out into the world. If you, say, take the way that you see the other people around you, your community, as you encounter others, you build up an image of the totality of the world around you within your single head. And so a community is like a holographic projection of some sense, where everyone is constantly reconfiguring the perspectives within each head. But what is in the head shapes how you see the world. Right? So if you make a hologram of an apple, right, you have the totality of the apple, let's say, from any particular perspective, but it's just an apple. You don't get everything else. And the difficulty of adjusting, say, your perspective when you exist as a hologram is such that adjusting any particular point it's profoundly different and hard to accomplish the change in the whole picture itself. So this is why we have these schisms, I think, and perhaps why the post-justification process is what is more naturally occurring in many people. So you could think of it like your whole image that you hold in your head at once shows the apple, but then someone comes along and forcefully changes one small pixel, right? They give you this new suggestion, and you have to reconfigure your perspective to make sense in that, right? You make sense of it, and it's adjusted by that totality of perspective.
Well, yeah, so that makes some sense with so yeah, you were saying groups each kind of contain their own, like people within a group have almost like a shared viewpoint for the world, and like different individuals within the group might have altered parts of that viewpoint. And so if you're within like kind of like a family or a small community, I'll go with church just because that goes into it later. If there are certain aspects of the world that don't make sense to an individual within the community, and they were to take those new perspectives to somebody that should know the answers to this, such as in the case of like Dawkins and Hitchens, to their teacher or something like that, and bring up these contradictions within the Bible or other problems that they see within it. And when the people of authority don't have the capacity to combat those ideas or those viewpoints, or to make sense of them for those people, that it causes a need to form a new group of some type, so some new sense of perspective.
Yeah, well, you see this fractioning occur in religion all the time. All the time. You have some initial founding, and then almost immediately you have schisms. Almost immediately, different denominations arise from underneath it. To the extent that there is a capacity or a place for that new schism to take up a place in the world, let's say, because you had the Catholic Church reign over the umbrella of Christianity for a long time. It's because access to the materials of what it was to be a Christian was limited, say.
That's what I was wondering, right? So then in that case, to build a good group, what if you build a group on these ideas that don't believe what anyone is saying, just you can question things. It's okay to not know the answers. You can find out what the answers are and let us know. So have that whole process as a part of your group, so that they don't have to go outside. I mean, they can go outside, but they're still part of the group, because it's only when they are not satisfied. I don't think it is just about not having it is not having the answers, not getting the answers, but it's also about the kind of restrictive mindset people have when they are in these kind of groups. So uh, I think part of the reason these groups other groups form is because like if they may not be very tolerant of someone who is asking all these questions or disagreeing. So if you had that as a part of your group, then that would be much better, in my opinion. uh, to say that it's okay to be disagree with even our basic foundations, and you are still part of the groups. So but then that I just don't see that. I mean, these big groups politically at least, or religiously. They I don't know, like, is there something about groups that it's just weird. If I was making a group, then I would want it to be based on that, right? You can dissent and all that, but that doesn't happen.
Right. Yeah, that goes along with the a person is smart, people are dumb. There's a type of inertia that exists in a group setting that in order for the cohesiveness of the whole to occur, you have to have a pattern that matches the most number of people within the group. And so the totality of your group is, let's say, the number of people that are able to adopt the majority of the principles espoused within that group. And then you got two strategies for dealing with incongruencies. You can limit the way in which you see the world, or you can reconfigure your understanding. Let's say you can add new rules. But in Sam Harris's perspective, or their community, anyone who attempts to say they believe in a God is, despised, let's say. By their own particular lens, they see religious belief as hooey, as something unworthy of consideration, because they have formed a lens that is not capable of discussing that viewpoint. It's taboo.
Mm-hmm. Well, this is something that I think I tried to articulate a couple of podcasts ago, that there's a certain amount of distrust I have for people within a group trying to talk about things that are unrelated to their group. So, like in the case of Dawkins, I very much trust his opinion on evolutionary theory and things like that. His if I wouldn't be going to Dawkins for a Bible study class or anything like that. Since his group bias is keeping him from being able to understand it perfectly. In the same way, I was saying how there's a certain amount of doubt or skepticism I have, even being a theist myself, for certain Christian or Jewish or theistic scientists. I know that they are filtering the world as they see it through the lens that they have, and so there are those that I do have a stronger sense of trust for are the ones that have had multiple perspectives over time. So, like, if it was a theist that became an atheist, such as Matt Dillahunty, then I assume that he has a better understanding of Christianity than, say, Sam Harris does, who I don't think was ever a Christian, really. In the same way, an atheist that became a theist, they have a better understanding of the atheistic perspective, kind of like C.S. Lewis or Edward Fraser. Yeah, and I don't know. It's something I notice within myself of, if there's somebody trying to talk about science and they reveal their hand as being somebody with a political, or not a political, a philosophical worldview, that is something that is restraining their ability to look at the facts objectively. In the same way, like, somebody that has a philosophical worldview of naturalism, they're not going to be able to discuss certain things that would go against naturalism. The same way, if somebody has a philosophical worldview of creationism, they wouldn't be able to articulate the points properly that go against creationism. Those types of things.
How do you determine how well these people are discerning within their own minds, though? So, for instance, if I
No. That's not. I'm not saying that. It's their ability to look at the facts. As long as I can like tell what their worldview is, then I can get a better understanding on whether or not that worldview would be affecting their presentation of the facts that they've come to.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So what if I like perfectly copied Sam Harris and stuck him in my left brain, right? And then perfectly copied Peterson and stuck him in my right brain. And I went around the world trying to understand the world using those two personalities.
I don't know how far you would be able to get because
it's right. They'd be battling each other out. I'd be talking to myself about the meaning of truth forever.
Yeah, I mean, people are able to live with contradictions within their understanding of the world. It's only once those contradictions are brought to light against each other do things shift within the person's mind. Or new frameworks need to be created.
When a choice needs to be made or an action carried out, I think that's when that occurs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You have to have one or the other opposing worldviews take control.
Yeah. So like you could have the opinion that Black people are of inferiority, and then you have the opinion that I love my daughter, and then the daughter comes home with a Black boyfriend or something like that. There's a new something needs to change within that. That's when contradictions come up, but only before that. Yeah, before that, there was no contradiction there.
Right. Yep. And whichever worldview is more meaningful, or whichever has more emotional valence, and in most cases, that's the one that wins.
Yeah. So there's the need to work through the emotion, kind of like with self-authoring or by discussing it with different people or each other, to see how much the emotion is tainting your current worldview or your current framework for working through the world. And yeah, I don't know. It's a hard thing because you can't ever like lose the emotion. The only way you can get through that is by looking at it from a different perspective, or at least that's a good way to work through those emotional frameworks that are restricting you.
I'm waiting for Sumit to say something.
No, I don't have much to say on these things now.
Okay.
I was mostly listening.
Now you've said something.
Yeah. I did have something I wanted to bring up, but I wanted the current things to reach some kind of understanding.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I think we're there.
Yeah, I got what I wanted to say out.
Okay. So okay. Before that, yeah, Tyler is, Tyler. So yes, here is the thing, Tyler. That is why I used to like the West, because from a perspective of, at least from what I saw on TV, it seemed that in West, and these days this is probably not correct, or it was not correct even back then, I think. But it certainly seemed that it was somewhat correct, that you can be kind of no. You guys can correct me if it is correct or not. So there is more freedom to be kind of a weirdo in America than other places. So in my country, like they wouldn't even let me wear certain kind of clothes when I go to my home state, and I'm like I'm so this is supposed to be a patriarchy, and men are supposed to have a lot of power, and like God knows what they'll do to women if they try to wear different kind of clothes. So
Like the pants
uh,
versus shorts thing.
yeah, and yeah, exactly. So uh, and so that's the case. And when I looked at America, I was like, oh man, cool, so you can be different there, and all that. And I believe I had met some real this thing. uh, I saw the interview of the CEO of a client we once had, and when he was asked, "Okay, what about your home country?" and it was a first world country, his home country, pretty good, and he said, "No, no, in my country there was no people. People's attitude, was just different. I had to come to America to start this thing." Uh, so the point I'm trying to make is like these foundational principles the Americans had, right, about individualism and all that. So that to me is kind of the recipe to create that group we were talking about. uh, so you have a group which believes in all kinds of bullshit, but uh, the individual is protected. So the individual can disagree, he can hit his head against the wall, he can do whatever the fuck he likes, and uh, the retaliation group can have is kind of uh, the those foundational principles protect him from those things.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure at what level to characterize it, but yeah, we let's say our openness. If you look at the 5-factor model, the openness in America is certainly tending towards the higher side. Right, openness to new ideas is it's fairly dramatically different than many other cultures, right? So that aspect of it's true. Now, whether or not that's valuable in the long run, who's to say? It certainly contributed to the rapid technological development that's occurred in the country. And I tend to think it's a good thing simply because you end up creating more and more spaces for more and more unique individuals to occupy and find value in. So I think we've always been kind of willing to say, well, we've been predominantly willing to say, that's weird, but maybe it has value. Let's see. Let's test it out. And that's really similar to the scientific method. You have to be willing to entertain odd hypotheses, let's say, and experiment upon them. So culturally, that's what we're doing, is experimenting upon odd configurations and finding out whether or not they work. It's like gay marriage, right? It's a perfect example of that. We're experimenting now with whether or not gay marriage is a thing that will work. Women in the workplace, women voting, all these things that America's kind of championed, let's say. It starts spreading out through the rest of the world, and then we'll see what happens. If it allows for value, both individually and culturally, then it should be kept. If it does not, if there's some kind of conflict, right? Because let's go with gay marriage. The primary conflict there is that the individuals feel they have value in the marrying, and then the broader, more conservative culture would say, yes, but it has a deleterious effect on culture as a whole, and it won't lead to a good place. So the conflict resolution has to occur at those two levels.
Yeah, that's what I noticed when I was in America. So I was using Airbnb, so and I was in their kitchen, and these people were so cool and everything, and we wouldn't have that kind of thing in India. Uh, and uh, I mean the trust there. I came from a different country, and their daughter was just living in the room next to me, and in my country those kind of things wouldn't happen. I mean, people just don't trust each other, and they have their reasons and everything. But why shouldn't Americans have their reasons? You know, some brown guy coming from overseas is going to be staying, uh, and it is so weird, you know, you people. And I would make all kinds of yeah.
I feel weird.
I would make these things, sandwiches in their kitchen, and I don't know much about your culture, so I would put in all kinds of stuff in those sandwiches, and then they would ask, "What did you make?" Then I'll tell, and I could tell that like it was they thought it was like weird, but they never told me that. They were like, "Oh, cool, you know, like you're trying it out. Let us tell us how it goes." And
Yeah.
and yeah, and I was like, okay. And whenever I told them this thing that as I told them about some weird dream I had, and uh, in my country, you know, people would say, that is that really possible? Humans can really do it? Uh, uh, you will probably they will say, oh no, you will probably, you know, Sumit, like faint or something before you reach the finish line. uh, and uh, and those people, they never said that. They in fact, his wife picked up a book from a bookshelf, handed it over to me and said, hey, this is the book that talks about, you know, what you need to be doing. And I was like, hell, these people are, man, these people are just so they just, rather than trying to stop you, they just give you like, hey, here is a book that will help you. So it was so cool. And you know, before leaving, I told them that you know, and that you guys are so human.
Human.
So yeah, that's what I said, that you guys are so human. uh, um, that kind of the best compliment I have for anyone. So
Yeah.
that
So
requires kind of a
fascinating.
positive, yeah.
I think many people see it that way too. That we have this higher order image of what it is to be human. It's like a thing that's arisen out of our animal past, and the more we have of it, the more human we are. Compassion seems to be an aspect of that. Um, yeah, it's
Yeah, you guys, it's not possible for you Americans to realize the value of something like that, because it's part of your culture. It's just that, you know, when people ask me, you know, hey, how was America? I'm like, oh man, great, it was great, and I get so excited trying to tell people about it. So you are kind of think of a company uh, where people who leave that company after having worked there or something, become kind of a brand ambassador for that company, uh, rather than leaving and then saying those people are a bunch of greedy assholes.
right. Yeah.
Right, so you have people becoming kind of your brand ambassadors. And you know, when I ask my friends who are over there in US, they're like, oh man, such a cool place, it is great. So there is that. uh,
No, it's
so
true.
it's
It's difficult to appreciate, the things that you have already, the things that were given to you without you having to earn them, which is the case for most people here. But we have a tendency to there's like a nationalistic tendency here to praise the military as the defenders of freedom, let's say,
Mhm.
which is very interesting. It's almost like our army is seen as the thing that gives us our freedom, and I disagree with that. I disagree with that quite a bit, but
Okay.
Yeah, but the sentiment that we do have something here that's meaningful and valuable, and that improves the human quality, I believe is true. I believe that aspect of it is true. And it needs to be exported to the entire world, just not via the army.
Yeah, okay. I see that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean that's why I got so this thing excited about the elections, because I was seeing that, like people are trying to destroy what I had valued since I was little kid. Uh, so there is that. Uh, I couldn't say anything like something like that about any other nation, like fuck them. I mean, they obviously have their importance and everything, but uh, you know. So, anyways, we will just keep talking about this until. Uh, Let me put it this way: if somebody, I don't know, blew up some country, any other country, I'll be like, okay, whatever, sad, sad, sad. Anyways, I have to read a book. But if
That's such an
uh,
interesting way to say it.
yeah, and if somebody blew up America, I'll be like, I want to go there. I don't care if I want to go there illegally or in a plane, or how I go there. When the final war or something starts, I want to be there defending that country. Uh, so that's how I feel.
Yeah, well,
Because that's
let's transform that into defending the ideal, and then turn India into another United States, let's say, right?
okay.
I
I'm
don't,
very skeptical. It will happen. It will not happen in my lifetime.
yeah, I don't think so either, but I think it can happen.
It's
I
been
think it,
happening little bit. It is happening.
right. It takes multi-generations. Yeah. It also has to do with geography too. I think geography has a profound impact on the way we see the world that we don't quite recognize, and historically, via many generations, the geography has a certain impact. So in America, you have, even in the songs that we sing about it, we envision from east to west coast as this massive landscape that any one of us can inhabit at any place, at any point, any time. If we just dream of it, we can go and take it. Right? If I want to move to California tomorrow, I can do it. John just up and moved across multiple states. You can't do this in many places in the world. There's no capacity for that. Right? You can't just up and change your job whenever you want in many places in the world. You can't change your haircut. Right? There are lots of things about how you can change yourself, but a lot of it has to do with the geography. Right? So if you live in a small country locked in the mountains of Europe, you have a particular perspective about how to behave and how to act. If you live on an island that you can't escape, right, you have to have these very particular rules about how to behave, particular rules about how to deal with disease, all things that help shape your worldview. If you live in a jungle, you have so like my view here in Tallahassee, which is as close to a jungle as you can get in America, let's say, although there are a few other places, but the amount of trees that we have here limits my perspective. I can't see the horizon. I never see the horizon. All of my visions in the external world go a few hundred feet at most, unless I'm looking at a body of water. And that you will see people choose geographical locations based on personality. So your surfer bum type who lives on the beach is a personality temperament. A select personality. It's a collection of certain temperaments. Laid back, relaxed, just likes to have fun, extroverted, right? Highly agreeable. And then you have people who want to live in the mountains. Hardy, isolated, conscientious, not agreeable, right? There are these locations and geographical configurations that help shape over generations the way that people see the world.
Hell, you are right. You seem right. I never. Yeah. Okay. That seem accurate to me, at least. Like, I never imagined living on beach. I always see some cabin in the woods or up in the mountains.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm a mountain person myself. Highly disagreeable.
Oh no, you! Oh no, you got some communication skills that really make you kind of. That doesn't come out. I have not seen that disagreeableness.
The disagreeableness? Yeah.
Yeah.
You should hang out with me here in my house from time to time.
Okay. Maybe John can testify to
Let's
that.
argue over something, Sumit. I want you to know who I really.
Okay.
No,
Normally we
I
don't
can be
disagree.
disagreeable, but yeah,
Yeah.
I've tried very hard throughout my life to attempt to curb that. I've tried to temper that aspect of myself, because you can't have meaningful conversation if you're constantly pushing people away. But it's an isolationist principle, I think, right? It's being okay with being by yourself if what is necessary in the evaluation is pushing people away. And you have to be willing to do that from time to time. You have to be willing to say, no, that's a terrible idea. That's really bad. It's just not a good idea, because these really bad things can happen because of it. And you're not quite seeing it, and I'm seeing it, and that's how I want to say it. The truth is, I've worked really hard on recognizing that may not be the truth. So,
Right. I mean, there are so many people, right? I used to look at it like, don't push people away. And I'm like, are you kidding me, man? There are so many people who can benefit from your ideas. Why are you hang up on these two people who just, are not open-minded? So that to me makes a lot of sense. Like, uh, this world is full of people, right? Uh, so you shouldn't be you shouldn't be like, I'm getting isolated and stuff. More people will come. uh, so in my opinion, you are kind of doing them a disservice, that you will be meeting them in future, if anyone is kind of hung up on the old people.
yeah. Well, this is to bring it back to what we were talking about before, and maybe it really is only tangentially related to the concept of the whole. But one of the problems with the way that Harris portrays religious type thinking is that he says it's in many ways the belief in a God is absurd. To believe that this book contains truth is absurd, and that's it. There's nothing more to it than that. And anyone who believes that, he then characterizes as like having the adjective absurdity, right? And that is then their characterization, and it defines them as a certain way and prevents him from seeing them any other way. And that's just, it's not good enough. It's not good enough. I have value as a human being, though I am religious, right? I have no more or less value than Sam Harris. Right? Even though I think he's absurd for characterizing people that way, I also allow for him to be other things, and over time change into other things, which he has. Right? It's quite obvious to anyone who's following these thinkers throughout time that their views change, or many of them do. Some don't. Some kind of rabidly adhere to their shtick.
Otherwise, we'll keep going on at this. I'll bring up that question I had. So this is from the lecture. So how brain computes. He was talking about how brain computes how dangerous the environment is, and when and like unexpected things are happening. So Peterson came up with 3 points. First one is neuroticism, like you guys know what it is, and then observed competence. These two things made sense to me. Like if I consider myself really good at what I do, and some kind of recession comes, or I look at myself as a competent person in multiple dimensions, then I'm more like even if the recession has come, I'll be like less stressed than a lot of other people, because I know I can make my living in multiple avenues, right? So I could certainly see that link. Uh, but then the third point, your brain calculates the proportion of the times you failed to the times you succeeded, and raises or drops your cortisol levels according to it. So my concern around this was, me and John kind of discussed this, that this cortisol is really poisonous, right? Uh, so how to get that under control? Like you could just be, your observed competence could be low. You could be a neurotic guy, and then your brain could be, let's just say, genetically more predisposed to being producing more, signaling that you produce more cortisol, and then you have you have failed more than you have succeeded.
Yeah.
So my question is, then you're fucked, right? What should oh god, what should you do then?
Well, change your geography. Change the geography that you inhabit.
Mental
You
geography or
or
physical.
what? Which? Yeah.
Physical, the environment. At least that's what it seems to be more effective to me. That's the cleaning up your room aspect. It's easier to adjust the external world as a reflection of your internal, or to adjust the external world as a reflection of what you desire your internal to become. That's why cleaning your room is so important. Ordering it. Setting it up such that you can achieve your goals. Right, I have my desk here. I have 2 monitors because it's far more efficient for me to analyze whatever, right? I'm often watching a YouTube video or listening to something through some multimedia means while I'm working on my main monitor. And I have a portion of the desk that I've half devoted to books, right? And like all it, you set up the world around you according to what you. We moved a bunch of stuff over here in the other side of the room so that VR was more accessible, right? Like everything you do in the environment is seems pretty meaningful.
Okay, so you are saying this is such a trick, man. Uh, this is such a revelation.
I'm saying move to
So
America, Sumit.
okay. I'm working on that. I might. I might be able to do that, but right now I'm kind of working on that. It will take time. Yeah, so this was an interesting kind of point of view, that you rather like our default is like we read self-help books to organize our mind and stuff, and if I'm fucked up, then I need to organize myself, and it's an infinite kind of loop. So what you are saying is just organize the world around you, or the geography, like you said, and things would get better.
Well, I mean, not necessarily. You might discover that the way you've ordered the world around you is a bad thing, and then you have to reconfigure it again. But I think it's easier to do that than it is to attempt psychic surgery, let's say. Right? It's easier to enact in the world changes in the environment and then have that then feed back into the mind than it is to attempt to adjust the mind internally. Although we might get tricked into thinking that it's easier to adjust the mind internally when we have certain circumstances that are profoundly experiential, let's say. So hallucinogenic experiences come to mind, as well as those kind of torchlight memories that you referenced earlier, like the hand on your shoulder. It seems like such a profound reconfiguration in the moment internally, right? Although, truthfully, it was your environment that changed, right? You had no control over it. It was the agential interaction with another human being, but it was your environment. The threat level of that was around you decreased dramatically. The total number of enemies dropped by 1. And in that single drop, the possibilities that you couldn't quite see before were open to you.
Hell, I didn't see it that way. This is an interesting thing I learned today. That's what I have to say.
All right. Do we have anything else to go over?
No, that was the one big thing I got from this thing, and I got the answer. I got my answer also, which is pretty interesting. Apart from that, no, I think I'm kind of done.
Yeah. Yeah, that one point about changing your environment, I was just trying to think about how, like, for minute things, or not minute, but small things that you want to incorporate within your day-to-day life, like how to build a new habit by changing your environment so that habit is necessary. Just trying to think of how to actually achieve that.
Well, there's... All right, so like, let's take journal writing, since we're talking about self-authoring. If I were to clear my desk here of all these books and just put a journal on it, and then sweep everything else off of my desk, the monitors, throw my computer out, get rid of the house, it's just me and the desk and the journal, I'm almost guaranteed to write in that journal. I have nothing else to do. Right? So there is an aspect of constructing and eliminating. Eliminating distractions and constructing objectives, physical objectives in the environment to achieve it. The same is true for, say, working out, physically working out. I used to be able to work out. I have a set of dumbbells here. I could pick them up and curl them. Right? They were in my view. I can no longer do this, but that was meaningful at the time. If you have the vision, just try to adjust the environment to match your vision.
Boy, can you manipulate other people with this?
Manipulate? Oh, hell yeah. That's what's going on right now. That's what Facebook is all about. Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, these are all environments that people live within. Highly abstract and mental environments that consist of clicks that release dopamine. And so it's like it's reduced the overall ability level for people to engage hard work to achieve goals, because everything is kind of superficial. Right? It just takes a couple of clicks, a couple of pictures, make a duck face, take it at just the right angle, and upload it to Instagram. You can get 2,000 people liking it and commenting on how beautiful you look that day. Or if you suck your gut in just right, flex your muscles just right, you take a picture of your wonderful bodybuilding progress, or you take a picture of your nice car.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
So, yeah, I mean, by returning to Facebook or similar things, you're involving yourself within the environment that is a continual reminder of what you're not, like, which leads to negative mental consequences such as lack of desire to attempt when there's no chance of attaining the types of things that the people that you continually see of achieving those types of occurrences. I wonder if that's also tied to, well, in your specific case, the physical environment. So you have those weights there that are still, that are almost a reminder of what you are not.
It's true, John. It's true. I do look at these weights and it reminds me of what I'm not. You're right. I should get rid of them, huh?
Perhaps.
Maybe not.
Bitch. Ah! They're
Maybe
heavy.
not, Tyler. Hey, Tyler. Maybe not, man.
Maybe not. Maybe not. But I think, honestly, there's another way to see it. The weights can be much more useful to other people right now, let's say. That's one thing I've thought about. There are a number of resources around me that could be much more meaningful to other people rather than just myself. And I've tried to, that's what I've been doing lately is marshaling my internal resources, because that's really all I've got now. How I see the world, perspective I have, the things I hope and cherish and desire for other human beings in the world. I'm trying to do something along the lines of making that the environment. But yeah, I think it is useful to analyze the things around me that are perhaps holding me back.
Yeah, for myself, I always, it's like a thing I already know about myself. It's my smartphone that I have on me. I spend hours upon hours of my day wasted on that, and not necessarily wasted, but it's like spent watching primarily YouTube videos from many different like people that I want to hear from. But it's still something that's getting in the way of my other goals. And it's like this hard contradiction within myself of one wanting to learn more from these people and having like hundreds of videos like that I have to get through essentially.
Too many, man. Too many.
Yeah. And then and then the rest of my, because it's just so much easier just to watch a video instead of actually like sitting down and reading a book or writing or something like that. But it's like, I know that that's one aspect that I could remove from my environment, but I don't know how I could actually do that, because having a smartphone it's like necessary to who I am. I just need like a way that I could lose it for a while. Like I know Dave Rubin, I think he's taking off all of June from the internet, and so he's taken his smartphone and put it into a safe, and he doesn't have the combination, and so he has to spend that time doing more productive, hopefully, things.
Well, yeah, that's totally right. Like our families in the West have been kind of scattered and split because our attention is further afield than that which is around us immediately. And yeah, we can more easily ignore the inadequacies of our current environment by focusing our attention on truly meaningful things, right? Somewhere else. It's just not as expedient. Although that's an interesting, somewhat contradictory viewpoint from one of the rules of Peterson, right?
Tyler, you're saying families being fractured or what? Uh, what is
Yeah.
happening to the Like they are not talking to each other. Is that what you meant? They are busy with their gadgets.
Yep.
Yeah,
Stuck on
yeah,
Facebook,
man. Fucks. Man,
Instagram,
these.
Facebook.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, this is one of the things that pisses me off. Uh, like, can we do that in India? I mean, I don't know what these parents will do of my generation, but I know many parents from previous generation. They were like, they were brutal people, man. If they don't want you to use Facebook, you are not using Facebook.
Right.
But then there was no Facebook back then. That's what I'm saying. Like, if they did not want you to play with a certain child in the kid in the neighborhood, then you are not playing with it, man. If they see you, you are running into a lot of trouble. Now whether that worked or not is a secondary matter. In some cases it worked. So my concern is like, why can't like the father or the mother in the family say no, this is not permitted?
That's the way it
Like,
should be. I think that's the way it should be.
Parents have lost their authority over the children because of the rise of individuality. Like a child is no longer the subject of the parent, but their own autonomous person.
But not just that. It's that's heavily, or let's say, influential. But also in the West, we have steadily offloaded responsibility to the state for the raising of children. Let's say they spend much of their time being raised by other people in schools, and when you have two adults having to work jobs in order to meet the financial requirements of living in an urban environment, you have little say or control over what your child has become, especially when they're living in an environment where everyone else has a smartphone, right? So, like you said, it's an integral part of who you are because you identify with all these other human beings around you who also have smartphones. So giving up a smartphone is like leaving that community of all human beings that have smartphones, and that's pretty much everyone. And then if you were to talk to someone about not having a smartphone, you're suddenly an outsider. And it feels somewhat disingenuous because you don't want to be an outsider. You want to be like a more whole human being, let's say. But now you're suddenly having to confront the entire population with your weird view and convince them of it. This is kind of like Sumit refusing to stand and sing for the national anthem, right? It takes a certain disagreeableness and a certain conviction that is hard to decide whether or not it's perfectly right.
here is the issue with the smartphone. So maybe 98% of the, I don't know what the percentage is. Let's just say 70% of it is like, okay, trivial stuff. I find myself keeping it because there is this, maybe 20-30%, like somebody from the family calling, someone you care about, or you might need to make an emergency call, or uh, some job, someone from the, the job website might call regarding some job offers, or the doctor might call regarding an appointment. So uh, and those things kind of maybe 10% of the uses, and it's because of that I find myself keeping it and deal with all these other distractions, because then you are reachable and anyone can look you up and call you.
Yeah, like I myself don't want to get rid of the smartphone entirely. Like, Owen Benjamin, he's moved on, or he's like gone back to just
have a Nokia
regular
now?
flip phone. Yeah, and like I don't see myself wanting to go that far at all, because I gain a lot of utility just by owning a smartphone. And like I said, I spend it primarily to listen to podcasts or YouTube videos of all these different people that I want to learn from. But so, yeah, there's that strange thing where I want to keep it, but I don't want to have access to it in all its ability to take over my motivation ability. It's like it saps out my motivation to do hard things, because it's instead offering itself up as a easier thing to accomplish.
Yeah, when I first got a smartphone, I had resisted for a long time, but I guess long time is kind of subjective. But, I was in a world. I grew up in a world that had no such thing as smartphones, and when I got one, this is what I continually use it for today. I don't ever watch anything on it really, because I'm usually sitting at a computer anyways. But the capacity for me to enhance my memory, which fails dramatically in certain cases, like names, right? The proportion of names I have searched for using my smartphone that's what I use it for. It's like an extension of my memory, and it was profoundly meaningful to have something like that for the first time and to continuously have access to it. But it's almost like the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? It's delicious to the taste, but with it comes mortality.
Okay, about Facebook, I had one question for Tyler. This is Tyler is going to like this.
All right, I'm ready.
Okay, so it would be such a waste, like if we had discussed this before. So I had this theory on women. So uh, hey John, have I brought this before? Uh,
I don't think
just
so.
tell me. So uh, okay, so let's just say I'm dealing with women and everything, and how men try to praise them to the this thing, whatever, praise them to the tower or whatever the word is, and all that. So that's cool, but this social media thing has taken it to the like next level. And what I mean by that is like it is so like it doesn't make any sense. Let's just say some girl, okay, so she's like moderately beautiful, and she uploads a picture which is kind of okay, it's not that good, and she would have like 200 likes, and people will be commenting, oh Angel, you are so beautiful. And I remember some people when I was in college, we were just about to graduate, and I had this friend, and some guy was saying, "Hey, did you see that comment? Someone is saying if he makes a movie, he will cast her as an actress or something." And so what that does is it I think it makes girl feel like rock stars. Uh, when they are not. So they wear all this makeup, they post all these pictures, and they get maybe let's just say 500 likes and 50 comments. And man, I can only imagine what that would do to your ego. And so that's fine, right? What is my problem? Why I am jealous, right? So okay, so my problem is like let's just say I'm a guy and I'm like on the hierarchy at the level 5, and there are 10 levels, and there are girls who are reachable to me, who are at maybe 5 6 or something, and now because of this social media bullshit, they are not at all reachable. Like, they have unbelievable amount of standards now. So it just you think it's hurting men, Tyler? Because I see, like, after those comments and those likes, they are like, no, they are not talking to you anymore. Because yeah,
this is noticeable extremely. It's extremely prevalent in the dating community online, for instance. The number of the number of men who sign up for dating services in hopes to attract women is declining rapidly, and is actually a fairly small number, with many of the accounts being bots on both sides, let's say. But it's extremely. I think you're right. The reassessment of your current status is overwhelmingly beneficial to the female at the moment, and negatively oppressive for the male, because you can't use social media to rise up that status hierarchy, but women can, since the fundamental assessments that men use are superficial, right? It's the surface.
here is my problem, Tyler. Okay, so earlier, you would have local guys and everything giving compliment to the women, and you might actually have had a chance of getting laid. Okay, and now some motherfucker sitting in America can like the picture of Indian girl,
Right.
and or some guy sitting in some different state, and
And she gets to
so
turn you down because she's got 500 people across the world that are willing to like her. Yeah,
yeah,
that's what I
fuck
mean.
me, man. Like, yes,
It's
yeah.
becoming more and more obvious, and that's the growing incel community, let's say, because it grows from the bottom up. The availability of the pool of men is ever widening, and the pool of availability of women is ever shrinking, and that was always the case, but it's rapidly more rapidly than it ever has before, increasing in disparity. It's not good. It's really not good. And it's probably, it's certainly related to the increasing number of school shootings that we see in America here, the social media aspect of things, for a number of overlapping reasons, but one of them being the status of the males that are committing these crimes.
Yeah. How come there's no Swiss communities? There's it's like I don't know. That's what the prime difference, or I don't know. There's tons of different prime differences. I just thought. Sorry.
I missed that first part. It broke up when you said it for me.
Oh, okay.
How come there's what communities?
No school shootings in Amish communities.
Oh, yeah. Well, so the Amish are really interesting. They have this thing called the Rumspringa.
Yeah.
And
we've talked about that a couple times, I think.
So, like, only the people who really want to be there are there, right? And the ones who aren't kind of evaporate off of the top and stay in the other society. That's one part of it, but certainly the element of social media is not having any exacerbating effect on these disparities for them.
Okay.
Meth is a problem with them, strangely enough.
What community? Okay, what community you were talking about, Tyler, earlier? The number of members are increasing. What was that community?
Just now, the Amish, or just prior to that? The
prior to that.
The incels.
What the hell is incel?
Okay, involuntary celibate is what it stands for. So the men who are celibate, who have no sexual partners, but not because of choice. It's the women turning them down forever. It's like the neck beards of the internet. You can think of like that. People who are overweight and have a neck beard and are just so unattractive to women that, you know. But the problem is that used to be the image of it, and now it's ever widening. It's not just the overweight. It's not just the neck beards. Now it's just if you're 1 or 2 on the attractiveness scale in general, you know, you never had a chance. Now it's if you're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and it keeps going up and up and up. Meanwhile, women who were once evaluated as 3s and 4s and 5s can go online and access the entire desperate community of the entire world and get upgraded because they're also desperately seeking attention from a 3, 4, and 5 to a 6, 7, or 8, or even a 10. Like you said, people will log on and just say, "Oh, you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." It's clearly not true, but they're all desperately seeking attention.
Yeah, that's the weird thing. I mean, the women use the rejection as a tool to increase their status. You know, I learned this many times, and I was like, man, this is weird. I mean, if she rejects a 5 or 6, she's like feels great. Uh, my friend told me this. I was just totally taken aback by it. But don't you think they are hurting themselves only, Tyler?
I think so.
Uh,
Yeah. But they don't. Not yet. There
okay,
hasn't
here is
been a
the
collective realization in the female community about what's going on. That seems to
no.
be the case.
How can it not be, Tyler? Like, okay, let me put it this way. In the end, it is the reality, right? Reality. So, okay, hell, huh? So, okay. So, what I'm saying is, let's say you are a 5 or 6 and you are upgraded to 10. Then social media flows into the real world also. Somebody looks at you as a 10 and wants to marry you. And that guy would be at a much higher status than you could otherwise have bargained for. That makes sense. Uh, but wouldn't, I mean, not all of them, I'm just, okay. So all of them are now going to men who are at, let's say, 6, 7, 8, or 9. Okay.
Yeah. Trying to follow
Well, yeah, necessarily use attractiveness as their prime evaluation. A lot of times it's status or potential for gain.
Yeah, there are two things going on there. They're using the social media to garner attention that increases their own feelings of status. So women recognize that their status to men is based on their looks. So when they receive 100 people all telling them they look good, in their own mind, that raises their status up in the hierarchy of women. Right? Meanwhile, when they look for men, they're still only looking for the hypergamous relationship. So rather than truly being a 3 and looking for another 3 or 4 man, they think they're a 6. And now they're only looking at 6 and 7 and above men. Right, so that's dramatically increasing the pool of men who are not able to get with the 3s anymore because they're making different assessments based on the reality of the status of the man versus the unreal status of the female.
Is there a social media where men are capable of like social posturing for their hierarchical status?
LinkedIn.
Mm.
Yeah, okay. Tyler. But you know what?
Doesn't have a female user base though. Dang.
Nope.
You know what the problem is, Tyler, with LinkedIn?
What?
Yeah, lots of them.
Okay, so at least in my country, you have to show, I mean, even on Facebook, as a man, you have to show certain kind of style to kind of attract women. So there is that also. Like, all these Bollywood. Here is the thing, you the kind of guy who would make progress on LinkedIn. I mean, and, I don't know. I guess you are inclined to be highly, at least in the tech community, highly technical. But you might be a little bit of weird also. And on the Facebook, the men I have seen who get a lot of attention are the ones who are kind of programmed by Bollywood into the kind of man that women would want. So since they are teenagers, they look at all these actors and they have all these hairstyles and they're having that fancy bike and everything. And women are like, fuck LinkedIn. And so, and then there are these men like who are like simple people, and they're like fucked. You're totally fucked.
Yeah, it's really weird because the way it works is for the LinkedIn is it's men attempting to convince other men that they're higher up in the status than they really are, right? So you write your resume and your LinkedIn page and you network as best as you can. You make as many small lies as you can. You put the best sounding titles on there. You beef your resume up as much as you can in the hopes that you will get an actually higher status, right? And the way that women determine that isn't by LinkedIn. Funny enough, it's purely by money. Can you buy me the things that I want? Or do you already have the things that seem to indicate that you can buy me the things that I want, or that you can take care of my child, to use a less deleterious way of looking at it, right? I don't want to disparage the entire female community for that strategy. I do want to criticize the unsustainable nature of it right now and the direction that it's going. But yeah, they don't look at LinkedIn. They just look at how much money you have because of LinkedIn.
Yeah, but you have to show that money somehow. Find a way to show it.
Oh yeah.
Right.
With the fancy haircut and the
yeah,
that's the form that it takes. Right? You look at the celebrities. Same thing happens here. You look at the celebrities. You copy, you emulate, right? The people that we've raised to the top of these various hierarchies. Look at one of the things that's fascinating to me is haircuts. I like watching what people do with haircuts. So the alt-right community was just so interesting. The alt-right community has developed their own haircut, right? It's close shaved on the side with a cropped top, and like this is what old what's his name? See, I'm so terrible with names.
Samantha Bee was the one that called it out on her show, assuming somebody had an alt-right haircut when they actually had cancer.
So, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
Fuck.
Didn't she just get fired?
There's something big. I don't know if it'll have any effect though.
Samantha B or what?
Yeah, Samantha B. Yeah, she got.
No, that was
Roseanne
that got fired.
No, Roseanne too. But Samantha B. just said, just called Ivanka, a cunt, and that blew up. Blew up on one side of the political spectrum.
Yeah, but latest report was she did not get fired. Where are you getting this that she got fired?
Oh, I don't know. Yeah, I thought I'd heard somebody. Steven Crowder. I saw it on the thumbnail. Yeah, so I don't know for sure. I just that's where that was coming from.
He's just generating thumbnails and getting orgasm from it. Probably. Yeah. But because everybody what I heard was that she's not gonna get fired, and they apologized and everything, and her apology was real, and somebody else's was not. So whatever.
Yeah, well, who knows? That's how my brain works. I pick up little tiny pieces of the environment, and it comes back from time to time. But I could care less about whether or not she gets fired. Or I couldn't care less. I could care more.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I've put my smartphone into a drawer. I'm trying to reevaluate my environment, and as of right now, the thing that is in the way of me accomplishing my tasks is my laptop in front of me, which includes all of you people. So, yeah.
Now we feel bad, John.
I'm sorry. I'm I'm trying to share my personal perspective.
You want to read a book, right?
Yeah. I got to finish
Okay.
a book. I'm a couple
And we
books
will-
behind on my goal process. So.
Yep. So we will stop preventing you.
Well, this was a good conversation, though. Yeah.
I agree.
All right. Oh yeah. Last week we didn't do our conversation on Demons by Dostoevsky. That was because not all of us had read the book. We might still do something into the future because I think Ben, he plans on finishing it, but if not, that's all right. I got something out of it. It is a long book and kind of sparse, but I don't know if I would accurately say I enjoyed reading it. I definitely enjoyed reading the last, 200 pages, I guess.
It's
the
just my
rest,
problem with the Russian authors in general. They sprawl.
Mhm. Well, I enjoyed Crime and Punishment quite a bit, but Demons, it didn't have a strong enough center point for me to be able to follow it strong enough. Yeah, with Crime and Punishment, you have the interesting protagonist of Raskolnikov, but with Demons, there's no real protagonist there at all. Like, you could say no, not Stepanovich, just Stepan Trofimovich. He was possibly the main character, but he's only in it for 40% of the book, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a bit more than that. And
Well, that's an interesting point, actually. So in America, we have people like George Washington that we look up to,
Mhm.
right? You don't really have that in Russia. You have all these leaders that are
like, what about the Tsar or the Putins of the world?
Yeah, well, who's looking up to them, and how it's so we evaluate George Washington as encapsulating, say, like the supreme principles of America, but Putin is adored by people who are afraid of him. Let's say, right, who fear his ire and his political power, and the same as far back as I can think. I mean, Yeltsin maybe was a little different, but
Yeah,
but
people
most-
are like Alexander the Great. Is he Russian, or there's some Ivan the Terrible? Yeah, just their adjectives kind of show their hand as to why they are so influential.
Well, it's another environmental thing. It's much of Russia is a hard, harsh place to live,
Mm-hmm.
and you have to be a hard, harsh person to survive there. So your leader needs to be, he needs to have some of those qualities.
Yeah. So your point, though, in regards to fiction.
So in that story, you don't have a clear hero,
Mhm.
right? You don't have anyone to worship as a hero. That may be intentional. It may be that he's attempting to show that not any given leader of any given group is wholly without flaws.
Well, that makes sense in regards to the subject matter, because that is a time of Russian history where people were very aimless in what is to be done about the new circumstances that they find themselves within.
Mm-hmm.
It's just this series of mishmash, kind of all these different things that kind of culminate into important end occurrences. But it's even brought up within the book, like, people don't understand how exactly, or the part that they played that led to the in circumstances.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that makes me at least appreciate it in a better way by seeing it from that perspective.
Cool.
Yeah. So yeah, we might go into that if Ben ends up finishing it, and I imagine, yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
Okay. Can you guys also talk about like what we'll be doing next week?
Yes. Okay. So next week is the conversation with Jordan Peterson, and I'm looking this up actually because I can't remember. It's somebody prominent though. Okay, Peterson conversations.
Is it on his playlist?
Yeah, it's the second one on his playlist for conversations with people. Dang it.
How about we do we pick them in order, or can we pick any of them?
If we want to, we can pick any of them because really there's no like structural order to them other than like.
Maybe we can pick the one with Steve Pinker. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a good idea since it just came up.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm
Sounds
down
good.
with that.
Sure.
This
And then,
list says the next person is Greg Hurwitz.
oh yeah, Greg Hurwitz. That's actually a good conversation, but of course it's tuned to my areas of interest, being a writer. But they go a lot into the different kind of archetypes in fiction, like they talk about Batman and those types of things.
Yeah, I have heard that one. Yes.
But yeah, Steven Pinker, and also our next book that we'll be discussing towards the end of July will be Friedrich Nietzsche's Beyond Good and Evil, which I think would be interesting in regards to kind of the main subjects raised within Crime and Punishment, because that was quite a lot about the rising of the Übermensch through, or at least that's how I interpreted it, as Raskolnikov was losing his cultural ties to morality that gave him the freedom to enact his own morality by his own decisions, and then the repercussions of that. So,
yep. Well, that was intentional, I think.
Yeah, it's funny to see the tie-ins between Nietzsche as a character and Raskolnikov as a character, especially Nietzsche's end to his life.
Insanity and
yeah. I see Raskolnikov as kind of that amalgam of different figures, but also like a symbol of Nietzsche, and then the shortcomings within Nietzsche, perhaps. But I don't know. I really like Nietzsche as an author, so I want to read as much as from him as I can. So articulate. I love it.
Yep. And very punny.
Yeah, his sense of humor as well. It's pretty good. All right. So yeah, thank you for participating, both of you, and whoever has listened or will be listening into the future. Anything else that we have to say or want to say?
Clean up your rooms.
Thanks, Tyler. Thanks, John.
Yeah, thank you.
Guys.
Thank you, Sumit. Yeah. All right. Bye.
Peace, bye.